Tat sarvam na samachakshva. Tat sarvam na samachakshva. Prishto yadiha kinchana. Prishto yadiha kinchana. Manye tvam vishaye vacham. Manye tvam vishaye vacham. Snatam manyata chandasat. Snatam manyata chandasat. Tat sarvam na samachakshva. Kristo yati hakinchana. Manye tvam vishahi vacham. Snatamanyata chandasat. Tat sarvam na samachakshva. Kristo yati hakinchana. Manye tvam vishahi vacham. Snatamanyata chandasat. Mataji? Tat, that, sarvam, all, na, unto us, samachakshva, clearly explain, prishtaha, questioned, yatiha, herein, kinchana, all that, manye, we think, tvam, you, Vishaye, in all subjects. Vacham, meaning of words. Snatam, fully acquainted. Anyatra, except. Chandasat, portion of the Vedas. Translation, purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas, and thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. Please repeat. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas. And thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. Purport: the difference between the Vedas and the Puranas is like that between the Brahmanas and the Parivrajakacharyas. The Brahmanas are meant to administer some fruitive sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas, but the Parivrajakacharyas, or learned preachers, are meant to disseminate transcendental knowledge to one and all. As such, the Parivrajakacharyas are not always expert in pronouncing the Vedic mantras, which are practiced systematically by accent and meter by the Brahmanas, who are meant for administering Vedic rites. Yet it should not be considered that the Brahmanas are more important than the itinerant preachers. They are one and different simultaneously because they are meant for the same end in different ways. There is no difference also between the Vedic mantras and what is explained in the Puranas and Itihastas. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, it is mentioned in the Madhyandina Shruti that all the Vedas, namely the Sama, Atharva, Rig, Yagya, Puranas, Itihasas, Upanishads, etc., are emanations from the breathing of the Supreme Being. The only difference is that the Vedic mantras are mostly begun with Pranava Omkar, and it requires some training to practice the metric pronunciation of the Vedic mantras. But that does not mean that Srimad Bhagavatam is of less importance than the Vedic mantras. On the contrary, it is the ripened fruit of all Vedas, as stated before. Besides that, the most perfectly liberated soul, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, is absorbed in the studies of the Bhagavatam, although he is already self-realized. Srila Sutta Goswami is following his footsteps, and therefore his position is not less important because he was not expert in chanting Vedic mantras with metric pronunciation, which depends more or less on practice. It depends more on practice than actual realization. Realization is more important than parrot-like chanting. End of purport. Om Jnanantanandasya Jnanangana Sakya Chakshurmitam Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitya Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Ne Vishesha Shandavari Pasarasatharine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Translation again. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas, and thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. Sananaka Goswami is talking to Sutta Goswami. So he's saying, we know that you're expert because Sutta heard from Shukadeva Goswami, who was, as it says here, who was a great self-realized soul. So much so, just by him coming to that assembly, which was full of sages and rishis and demigods, the yogis and jnanis, It's a big event. The emperor was going to leave his body. He's asked a question, what should one do at the time of leaving the body? So naturally any thoughtful person is interested in this topic. What happens at the end of life? And it's a question that's an age-old question because nobody knows. Nobody knows the meaning of life, therefore they don't know what to expect at the end of life, what the end of life, what it is, what death means. So not a few people know. So Sukadeva was one of those persons. But although he was a perfectly realized soul, they could see that by physiognomy. Just by seeing him, they could understand he was fit to sit here. Even his guru was there at that assembly. Narada was there. He came, but they spoke, and he was young. This boy, he was a young boy, but they could see by his appearance and his ambience that he was a perfect soul. But still, although he was perfect, he had nothing to learn, nothing to achieve. He was still attracted to Bhagavatam. So, because the Bhagavatam is nothing but the essence of all the Vedas. It's a summary study of the Vedas. Vedanta Sutra. That's why when the Gaudiya Vaishnavas were challenged or asked, even Mahaprabhu, what is your bhashya? What is your explanation of the Vedanta Sutra? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers said, we don't need one. Bhagavatam is natural, we don't need to have our own separate one. Bhagavatam is a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And that was, that's a fact. So the Bhagavatam it starts from the transcendental platform. It starts from the platform of liberation, where the Vedas are mainly talking about dharma, artha, karma, and moksha. So after moksha, what do? So nobody asks this question either. They think, moksha, liberation, kevalam, free from the material modes of nature. But then what do? You can't be nothing. You can't do nothing. Right? You have to do something. So that question's rarely asked either, because it's such a great thing to get out of the material world, to get out of Maya. It's such a difficult thing. It's such a great thing that they think once you're out of Maya, that's it. But it's not. You're just out of the material coverings, the universe. But now what do? So it's the same as anything we do. Anything we do, endeavor we do, it's a struggle in the material world. To achieve something, there's always a struggle. We have to battle through time and space. These are our main opponents. It's difficult. And when we achieve something, then we think we're successful. So that on a bigger scale, when the more broad-minded people are thinking about liberation from the material world altogether, it's such a great thing that the question of what do you do next doesn't come up, because it's such an endeavor just to get to that space. So Bhagavatam is going to teach only the topics related to transcendence, or spiritual topics, specifically the pastimes and the descriptions of Krishna. That's Bhagavatam starts like that. So it's considered the spotless Purana, Amala Purana, pure Purana. So, whereas the Vedas, they will describe all kinds of activities and all kinds of rules and regulations, how to keep yourself basically out of the modes of passion and ignorance. That's what the rules are for. Which means liberated from the modes of passion and ignorance. So that's what the the Vedas are for, and it's telling you how to live your life, how to satisfy your senses, develop economically, so you live a comfortable life, and at the end you can go for the liberation. So that's the subject matter: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So mainly it's talking about the fruitive activities, because everyone wants to get something. Everyone's in the material world. Everyone is in need. So we're thinking on the material platform: if I get this need fulfilled, then I'll be satisfied. If I get that one fulfilled, of course it doesn't work, as we know. For a little while it works, but then it goes away again. So there's a constant endeavor, because there's a constant need, a constant lacking there. But to try to fulfill that need materially, that constitutes Maya. That is a material existence. So then in the transcendental scriptures like Bhagavatam, it's telling you, don't worry about those things. Your happiness and distress is going to come anyway, according to karma. Nothing you can do about it. So don't waste your time trying to get what you don't deserve, or get rid of what is going to come to you anyway. So you're wasting all that time you could be utilizing properly. But you could be performing service in that time. So, because people are not so much interested in transcendence, they're more interested in enjoyment, because happiness is the goal of life. Let's face it, we're all looking for happiness. And so if we think that we can enjoy we need stuff, facility to enjoy, then we'll go that way. So then the Vedas tell you how to do it, how to get your desire fulfilled in a way that you won't be so entangled. It means lead a very pious life. From Dharma comes Artha. It's not by hard work, it's by Dharma. You get facility. With that facility, then karma, you can enjoy it. So that's what the Vedas mainly talk about. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. They're mainly talking about these three modes of material nature, how to live in the three modes of material nature comfortably. But the actual real point is how to get out of the modes of nature. But who's interested? Let's face it, there's a handful of people on the planet who are actually interested, relatively speaking. Out of 8 billion people, who's interested in getting out of the planet? Understanding finding the real purpose of life. Really, literally, hardly anyone in Kali Yuga. So all those different mantras we're chanting, and you have to, when you perform these Vedic rituals, there's a lot of rules there. It's not. There are specific times. There are better times in the day than you should do these things. So you should look on the almanac and find the best part of the day, which will be most fruitful to do that particular thing in. Then there's other factors like cleanliness and the proper pronunciation of the mantras. So there are meters, different meters for the mantras. I mean, the different Vedas, they have different meters also. So, in the north you hear right? And in south you hear from the Samaveda, Rig Veda would be that. Samaveda would be more melodious. Like this. So, but they all have the similar mantras, but they're different meters, and you have to follow them. So when they're performing a big yajna, they have a referee, brahmana, a referee, pandit, who knows all the mantras. So when they're chanting, if someone says a mantra wrong, then he stops, say it again, it's the wrong one. Because if you don't chant the mantra exactly as it should be, then you don't get such a good result. So as perfectly as you perform these things, you observe all these rules, and to that degree you get the great result. But for devotees and the transcendentalists, they're not looking for a result, a material result. Their objective is to please Krishna, because they know that's the actual natural function of the living entity. So then those rules don't become so important. It's more because there's for the smartas, for the Vedic Brahmanas, then the rules are all important. The rules are everything that you follow. But for the devotees, pleasing Krishna is all important. So if the rule that is not suitable, is not conducive to serve, then they'll leave it and do something that is. Of course, the principles won't really be broken by surrendering to Krishna, but so therefore the Vaishnava is sometimes criticized by the smarter Brahmanas. Why are you doing like this? Why are you doing like that? Why are you not doing like this? This is Vedas. So because of all the different types of people in the material world, with all the different mentalities, then there's all these different dharmas, different religions for those in the mode of passion, those in the mode of ignorance, and those in the mode of goodness. The 18 Piranhas, six for each mode, and each one is stressing or emphasizing one particular a way to progress, particular deities to worship. That's just to harness everyone, to get everyone connected to following something, some discipline. Because as soon as you follow discipline, you have to accept you're a servant. Nobody likes to accept. Everyone wants to be master. So as soon as you accept some discipline, then you have to accept you're a servant. There's something greater above you. I'm not the greatest. I'm not completely independent. There's someone there. And of course, that Krishna is a compiler of the Vedas. So indirectly, they're surrendering to Krishna. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there's worship the demigods. Actually, they're worshipping me, because the demigods are my agents. They're my parts and parcels. They're my limbs. They're executing my order. So they're worshipping me, but indirectly. They don't have sufficient knowledge or intelligence. So for less intelligent people, Krishna says there's different scriptures. But those who are intelligent, they'll take to the Bhakti Shastras. And Bhagavatam, it says those who are most intelligent, they'll take to the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Haribol, all the intelligent people. But that's just a mercy that we didn't have to wait to go through all these processes which are recommended in the Vedas to come free from the mode of passion and ignorance. Because mode of goodness is not a problem for executing devotional service. It's a recommended platform. But in Kali Yuga, everyone is in the mode of ignorance, born in the mode of ignorance. Everyone is born Sudra. So, and there's no time, because of our short life and our diminished qualities, there's no time to actually go through these purificatory processes. So then Krishna has come as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Namo Mahavadhanaya, Krishna Prema Padayati. So he's given the essence of the Bhagavatam, he's given love of Krishna, a process by which is very simple, that anyone can follow. Otherwise, if you have to be qualified, then there will be no candidates. Right? First you've got to come to the mode of goodness. Then you can chant the Gayatri mantra, and understand the Vedas. So there's no qualification and there's no time to get qualified, to get purified in Kali Yuga. So then, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has waived all these methods of purification. Mahaprabhu has dismissed them. Not necessary, because it's not possible. So you chant Hare Krishna. You give up simple activities and chant Hare Krishna. That's it. And anyone can do that. It's only 3 words, Hare Krishna Rama. Anyone can do this. And it doesn't depend on age or gender or intelligence. So. As well as many examples in the Bhagavatam of even children and others who have attained perfection, Prahlad, Dhruva, etc., have attained perfection, even at such a young age. They didn't have any knowledge, real knowledge. So that's transcendental, that's the Bhagavatam. Then Mahaprabhu is the essence of all the Vedic learning. But his statement, Jiva Swarupa Nitya Krishna Das, that the soul is the eternal servant of Krishna. Prabhupada said, if you understand that, you understand God is great, I am very small, I am his servant. He said, that is self-realization. Now you act like that. Don't try to take the great's position. Don't try to make yourself the center. Try to make Krishna the center. Then that's perfected. That's perfect activity, or perfect consciousness, perfect mentality. When we're doing that, that's Krishna consciousness. Trying to make Krishna the center instead of oneself the center, because everyone likes to be in the center. Everyone likes to be appreciated, because it's like being God. That is our horrible secret desire, envious of God. Let Krishna be God, please. That's his position. And we couldn't do it anyway, right? Even if you could be God, what would you do? We'd probably make a big mess of everything. Yeah, so Mahaprabhu was giving that. He's teaching Vairag Vidya, because that's something we can actually follow. But the love of Krishna, that's mercy. That has to be given. So that you have to wait for. So here. So he's mentioning this the verse. You're expert in everything. There's a few things you don't know. A few sections of the Vedas which deal with detailed things, the mechanics and but you know all the essence of the Vedas. You know all the principles of the Vedas, and so because you know them, you can clearly explain them, and you can answer these questions, because they offered 6 questions. Now you can answer them, please. This is the beginning of the Bhagavatam. We're going to answer those. Now he's going to answer all the questions for them. And that becomes the question and answer becomes the manifest as Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam ki. If there's no comments, we can talk a little about Gaurkishoras Babaji Maharaj's disappearance day today. Namo Gaurkishaya Shakshat Vairagyamurte Vipulam Varsambhoje Parambhojayate Namaha. Gaurkishoras Babaji is said to be renunciation personified. So the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, I never knew that a person could be so renounced. He said, never been such a renunciate since Raghunath Das Goswami. His renunciation was scary. I mean, he was super renounced. He was born in Bengal, and he had a wife married, then his wife died, and he went to Vrindavan. And he was in Vrindavan about 30 years, 30 to 40 years. And he was quite famous there. When Bhaktivinoda Thakur established the Yog Pit in the birthplace of Mahaprabhu, then he came here, and he was initiated by a Bhagavat Das. It was a disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji. So Jagannath was his Param Guru, so he told him to stay in Mayapur, never leave Navadvip. So he lived here for the rest of his life. And he would, there was many Babajis at that time. He was associated with Bhaktivinoda Thakur and a few others, great souls. He would accept no dwelling place, permanent dwelling place. He lived for some time under the, they put on the country boat, they put that bamboo and some plastic so they can keep the sun. He lived under that, one of those on the side of the Jalangi for a long time. He would eat mud sweets and drink the Ganges water. He would take his cloth from the burning ghat. When they bring the body, they have the cloth, and they throw that cloth and they burn the body. So that cloth, he would wash it and wear. Once someone gave him a very nice quilt, thick, good winter come in. And he put it on top of the hut. He hung it over his little hut. So they asked him, why you do that? It's meant you're supposed to... He said, no. He said, just by seeing this quilt, he said, the cold will be afraid and run away. He had a sense of humor also. A lot of... because he was famous, he was very powerful. And some rich devotees they came to, they wanted to do some service and build him a kutia. He said, no, I don't have it, because his place was really, just nothing practically. So he said, I don't have a problem. He said, the only problem living here, he says, that materialistic people come disturbing me. So he said, if you really want to serve me, he said, you can leave your stool here, then no one will come and bother me. Of course, he meant the stool of all their riches and things like that. But he actually lived in a latrine at one time. There was one wealthy devotee who had property in Navadvip, who used to give residence to make little kutias for the renunciates. And then, but Gokishwar said it was too many people disturbing. He was going to live in the latrine, in the bath toilet. So they couldn't believe it. But then he saw he was actually going to do it. So then he, renovated the whole thing. And Gokishwar used to do his bhajan in there. Then people would see it was a toilet. They were, So only the really sincere souls would actually go there. So it's very difficult to understand. He's a Paramahans, avadut. Sometimes he would forget to put his clothes on. He was so absorbed in his internal bhajan. And practically, he would soak rice in water. He wouldn't even cook it sometimes. Rarely he would cook. And he would eat that. One time there was a festival, he said, we have a festival tomorrow. He said, invite everyone, we're going to have a big festival. So he says, late now, how are we going to arrange all the prasadam? And he said, no, we won't have any prasadam. We're going to fast whole day and just have kirtan. Invite everyone to come, this utsap. So he would act differently for different people according to his mercy. And one person came to see him, wanted darshan, so his assistant told him, Babaji, someone wants darshan. So he said, tell him to give 2 rupees and he can get darshan. 2 rupees was quite something. So they gave the 2 rupees and he opened the door. Have a look. That's what you want. But then actually he called them over and he blessed them. He said, Mahaprabhu has sent you here, his land. So now you constantly chant the holy name of Krishna. But other times he wouldn't even bother to see people. Sometimes he would admonish them. He would use severe language at them. So people were surprised. The saint, how come he's speaking like this? Saintly person is showing anger, etc. But he wouldn't tolerate anything but, actually pure devotees. He didn't. Because many people came to live there, and there's a lot of descriptions of the different Babas that lived there, but they weren't actually, they were more or less imitating. Because you can't actually imitate that. You got to be on a transcendental platform. You got to be established in your actual relationship with Krishna before you can forget about eating, sleeping, and all those things. You can't do it artificially. It's not a process. So another big Zamadar came and said, Babaji, we're having a big program. Many influential people come, and you come, we want you to be the guest speaker there. He said, why do you want to take me away from Navadvip? He said, no, this is a big program. He said, why do you want to take me from Navadvip? No Maharaj, we're your servants. He said, you're my servants. Yes? Okay, you stay here, don't go back home. Stay here, take the holy name. Don't worry about it, I'll feed you, I'll give you a place to stay. Hare Krishna Maharaj. So he would call, he couldn't be bluffed. And says he was in contact with a super soul, he'd actually see people, one time exclaimed at night, did you see that? 10 o'clock at night, did you see that so-called Babaji who was giving Bhagavad recitations? You know what, he just went to his widow's house. It was so he said they're all doing it for profit and adoration and followers. So when they go in their kutir, because there was a few kutirs there, and the owner gave Gorgishore permission to let who could stay there or not. So one of them, he made a big show. He was very of renunciation, and he used to put himself in his room. So Babaji said, Maharaj, what are you doing in that room? He said, Maharaj, you told us to go in the room and close the door. He says, yes. He says, go in. It means go inside your body, and close your eyes to the outside world. He said, that's what bhajan means, not sitting in a dark place. How can you do that? You got to be perfect to be able to do that. In fact, there was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada who asked if he could take Babaji. He said, I get up, I chant 60 rounds before Mangalarti, and he's a sannyasi. Could I take Babaji? Prabhupada said, if I give you Babaji, he said, you sit down in a solitary place and you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Oh, wasn't she nice? Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, wasn't she nice? Hare Krishna. Not to be imitated when you're ready for that kind of renunciation. Otherwise, you're going to think of material desires will spring up. Where are you going to get your pleasure from, right? So if you have a lot of activity, then you can you can engage the mind and the senses like that, but you can't just do nothing. So the mind, if you stop the senses, the mind will go to where there's pleasure and where there's satisfaction. That's what we're looking for. So then, if you're not getting it from the spiritual platform, then you go back to the material platform. So, when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur told Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to take initiation from him, because Bhaktisiddhanta, he said, I've met a lot of so-called sadhus and elevated people, because he was quite a prominent person, and his father Bhaktisiddhanta also. So father was quite famous. So they met a lot of famous dignitaries as well as saintly persons. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was. But he said, I've never really been impressed with any of them, practically. But when he saw Gaurkishore, he said, then I saw what actual renunciate is, a pure devotee is. He said, I was shocked, stunned. I never saw such renunciation before. And he went to him for initiation, but Gaurkishore said no. He said before Gaurkishore, I said, how can I accept disciples? I couldn't even accept myself as a disciple. How can I accept somebody else? So he told Bhaktisiddhanta that he said, you give up this pride of learning, because he was a great scholar, he was famous. He got the title of Bhaktisiddhanta for his treatise on the astronomy. And he was such a learned scholar. He was a fiery debater. Nobody could stand in front of Bhaktisiddhanta. He's called the Shimha Guru. So he said, give up this and he was very pure. He's a Naistika brahmachari. So Gaurkishore, give up this pride of learning and your purity, attachment to this knowledge and purity. He said, then I understand it was an attachment. Of course, that's his humility. He was saying that it was pride, because he was like undefeatable in debate, spiritual debate, and his character was immaculate. And so that kind of jolted him. And he said, I thought this person has a very big ego, false ego, or he's completely transcendental. So then he understood that he was, by his association, he's actually completely transcendental. And he didn't have any other disciples. So Bhaktisiddhanta tried, but he always said no. Then one day he feelingly asked him that, please initiate me. He said, okay, I'll speak to my Prabhu, that's Lord Chaitanya, I'll ask him. If he gives me the word, then I will give you initiation. So the next day he came hurriedly back. Bhabati Maharaj, what did Mahaprabhu say? He said, I forgot to ask him. You come tomorrow. So like this, then Bhaktisiddhanta was but he was determined. He said, why should you initiate me? He said, I'm a great moralist, I am a great scholar, and you worship a great debauchee and a thief. He's your worshipful Lord. Why should you be interested in a disciple like me? I consider myself a great scholar and moralist, and you're worshipping a thief and a debauchee. And then he began to broke down and said, if you don't initiate me, I can't maintain my life. He quoted that, Karuna Nahali Kandiya Kandiya, Prana Nana Vivara. I cannot maintain my life. Then Gaurkishore was pleased. Okay, go take a bath. take a bath in the river. And then they came and gave him initiation. Also, on the disappearance of Gorkishodas, that was on this particular day, then there was a big argument about who will take the samadhi of Gorkisha. And it was quite heated, because if for materialistic reasons, if you had the Gorkishodas was famous. So if you had the samadhi there, a lot of people would come to see, and there'd be a lot of pranami. That was the materialistic consciousness of some of them, apparently. So there was quite a little storm brewing. So the inspector of police also went there to make sure nothing got out of hand. Then the Bhaktisiddhanta heard that. He came over, and he's wearing a green chadar, someone said, usually white. Green means the color of separation. So he came there, and the Babaji said, "How can you?" So he demanded, "I'm the only disciple. I should take the body and make samadhi." So he said, "How can you do? You're not in a renounced order. You're still." He wasn't sannyas then. You're not in a renounced order. How can you take this renounced person? He said, "No, I'm not in a renounced order." He said, "But still," he said, I am his sincere disciple." He said, "And I follow strictly." He said, he said, "But if anyone here is of the purest nature and character, if anyone hasn't had illicit connection with women within the last 1 year, or the last 6 months, the last 3 months, they can come and take this body. In the last 3 weeks, in the last 3 days," gradually the Babaji then went away. And the officer said, "How will you know if they're telling the truth?" He said, "I will accept what they say." He said, "But if they're not pure," he said, "they will be destroyed." Police officers, I was surprised. So surprised to hear that. Because another thing they wanted to do, Gorkishoda says, if there's no place for my samadhi, you let the Navadvip cleaners, the bhangas, you let them drag my body through the streets and then throw it in the Ganga. So some people said, "This is Babaji Maharaj's last request, we have to fulfill it." Bhaktisiddhanta, "You fools." He said, out of his humility he is saying that. He's fit to be carried on our heads, we should carry him on our heads in procession. So they, so then they had the samadhi there in Navadvip, and it was part where the Ganges used to flow that way one time. That samadhi was there for some time, but in due course of time, the Ganges again came back and was taking all that land away. So then the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, they went, and his disciples went there, and they took the whole samadhi complete, because it was falling into the Ganges, the mud, so they cut it out and took the whole samadhi to here, to the Chaitanya Mat, next to Radha Kund, where it is now. And he said Babaji Maharaj didn't want to stay there with those Babajis. He said they're all performing illicit activities. He said he was disappointed, so he wanted to come. He wanted to get away from that place, so we brought him here to his eternal place of bhajan on the side of Radha Kund. So today is his disappearance, and we can pray for his blessings that we may have a little of his renunciation of thinking ourselves the enjoyers of this body and the material world, and his little bit of his absorption, his great absorption that he had in Krishna. He was so absorbed, sometimes he wouldn't eat for days. So absorbed in the Krishna Smaranam. So, what a great, perfect soul. One time he was one person, he came from, he gave up a noble family, he renounced and came there, and he was staying with Bhaktisiddhanta. Then he went to Gokishore, and he said, I've been staying across with Bhaktisiddhanta, but I don't like it there. The mood is too much Vaikuntha. He's doing all his management and stuff like that. I stay here with you where you're not renounced and just doing bhajan. So Gokishore had been very angry. He said he has an eternal place here, Bhaktisiddhanta. I also have a place in Mayapur. He said, but you can't understand these things. Because Bhaktisiddhanta said, I'm doing all this work. I'm doing all these things. He said, but I'm just doing all the physical stuff. He said, but the dynamo, the battery within me, he said, that is Gokishore's Babaji. By his potency, by his, I'm doing all these things. In other words, I'm doing them on his behalf, or he's doing them through me. Although himself he was a Bhajananandi, whereas Prabhupada Siddhanta said he was a Gostinandi. So both are correct. Prabhupada was just speaking to one Babaji, and Prabhupada was glorifying him. You're so advanced, you're so fortunate. You've given everything up, you have nothing to do, just chant Krishna's name. And the Babaji said, no, he said, you're greater than me. He said, you've left this, you've gone out and taken Krishna to all over the world. And he says, you're a much greater position than me. So they're both glorifying each other, because they're both perfect situations, but the real renounced, the path of renunciation is not actually recommended. That renunciation of material world, material endeavor, it comes with one's advancement in Krishna consciousness. So it's something you have to practice renunciation. That's what the yogis do. That's what the jnanis do, to try to control their senses. They practice these different kinds of austerities. But that's not bhakti. We engage all the senses in Krishna's service, then they're controlled. So it's a much easier process. It's a more enjoyable process. So you're not bereft of happiness, and you're not bereft of proper activity, where these other processes of renunciation are very dry. And if you practice too much, this mona or fasting, then your heart becomes a little hard. You can agitate it, you get angry quickly. If you notice that on fast days, you can easily get upset. So they can't be imitated, these perfect souls. So when Sukadeva Goswami came, although he was a boy, right? How old was he? 16, 18? I don't know how old he was. He was a very young man. And there was elderly sages experienced with wisdom, but they saw he was actually completely renounced. He was disinterested in the material world. So they immediately understood, you're fit to speak. So these wonderful characters we're hearing about, such exalted souls, the greatest people that have ever existed. This is our bread and butter. This is our daily kata. Hearing these great personalities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly Himself, and then the more recent saints like Gokishora and other great saints, down to our Srila Prabhupada. This is just common daily talk for us. It's such an exalted subject. And we're so fortunate we can't even appreciate what we actually have. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai, Divine Grace of the Gokishora Bhakti Goswami Maharaj, Bhakti Maharaj Ki Jai. There will be a Pushpanjali. We have the Murti of Gokishoras in the temple, Panchatattva. At noon there will be a Pushpanjali and Artik. Hare Krishna. Any other stories, anecdotes? Janmashtami, then Guru.
I have a question on the translation. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portion of the Vedas. It seems that such a self-realized soul would understand the meaning, but maybe not be able to do all the Vedic rituals, understand the purpose behind it. I'm a little confused by that. I don't know if you got a comment on that.
Well, we did. That's what Srila Prabhupada said. The Vedas that are dealing with probably the Karma Kanda, which is a great portion of the Vedas. So he wasn't into all the he didn't study all the details and ritual and mantra like that. That's what Srila Prabhupada is expressing here. But he knew the principles.
One thing that you mentioned, that sometimes with the Vedic rituals, we may reject them if it's not favorable for bhakti. Way back in the early 90s, Giriraj Swami was giving a Nectar of Devotion course at the VIT, and he told about how there's one of the rules from the in deity worship in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is not accept worship before the deity. So then one disciple said to Prabhupada, "But Prabhupada, every day you're accepting Guru Puja. How can we understand this?" And he said, "It's more important that my disciples develop love for Krishna than follow some tiny rule and regulation." Just an example like that. And my understanding is that Prabhupada accepted Guru Puja like that because Western devotees, they didn't really have a conception of what it meant to worship a guru. So Prabhupada put it on a very high platform so that they could really understand and then make advancement, take the spiritual master seriously, and then make progress in their love towards Krishna. It's an interesting point that came up. Giriraj Swami had so much association with Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhupada said, if you knew how many rules there was in deity worship, you'd fall over. So he told Jains, keep it simple. Because the rules are there, doesn't mean to say you have to follow every single one.
I've never really done that much pujari service because I was always a Sankirtan devotee. But it's the little that I've done, it seems like there's much more rules than there were in the old days.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You see that as a favorable aspect of the whole culture.
Well, you gotta answer these questions when people say it. You got to answer the questions. Why aren't you doing that? Sanatana Goswami was instructed by Mahaprabhu to write the Hari Bhakti Vilas. He's put this there, and we're not doing it. And you got to kind of keep that balance between keeping it simple So then Prabhupada told us to take like the essential things, because you can't follow everything. You follow everything, you'll be 4 hours before you get a darshan of the deity. I mean, if you think all the rules have to be followed, so it won't be practical. And that's just an auxiliary to engage our senses. But our main spiritual advancement comes from the Sankirtan, Nam Sankirtan. But this is to engage our senses and mind. It is a good anger to. So therefore, it's recommended for that.
There's one point that when we engage in the other angas of bhakti, that we should always be serving the holy name. Is that something that, like a pujari, when he's dressing, is he like chanting in his mind, or is that something that's strictly followed?
No, he's thinking of serving the deity. He's seeing Krishna, so he's serving Krishna. Not different. When he's chanting japa, he should be thinking that's also not different from Krishna. We're serving Krishna by, and we're hoping to experience Krishna through his holy name by chanting. We're waiting for that. But when your Krishna's in front of you, that's it. You're seeing Krishna. You're dressing him, trying to make him beautiful, so the devotees can appreciate. At the time when they had trouble with the microphone, holding the microphone in the thing, then the Prabhupada said, tie it with your Brahman thread. So the devotee. So I don't know what the caste Brahman may have said about that, but. Guru Dakshin Prabhu behind it.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Very nice class. Over in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house area is I don't know whether it's a samadhi, it's a remembrance spot of Gurudas Babaji. That is like a Pushpa Samadhi or something that he set up there, or what's the arrangement there with Bhaktivinoda Thakur and
that's a bhajan kutir. Because he spent a lot of time, quite a bit of time in that place, in Bhaktivinoda's house, and he would sleep there sometimes, some around. So I guess that was a spot. Sometimes we sleep under the tree.
Yeah.
So the bhajan kutir.
It's under the huge banyan tree there, and the wall probably wasn't like it was, and so yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Bhajan kutir. Yeah. Thank you.
Jai Sri Bhakti ki jai, Sri Prabhupada ki jai, Bhaktivinoda ki jai.